made me miss. I'm Liam, this is Rob, and for the fourth part of our Hugtober season of Hollywood podcast, we'll be looking back at John Landis's 1981 horror comedy classic, American Werewolf in London. Famed for its physical effects and great dialogue, does it still hold up more than 40 years after its original release, or has time finally caught up with this once classic of the genre? I mean, for me, it always actually felt like quite an old film, because this film is, it's 1981. This actually came out before I was born, so I don't think I watched this until like the late 80s, early 90s. So already it kind of felt like an old film in many respects, but in terms of the way it's structured and the dialogue, even today it still feels relatively modern. But I couldn't escape the fact that, especially from a British perspective, where it's so relatable, you're like, some of this looks like my grandmother's house,
Yeah, so what aged it for me? Well, first of all, I'm later than you. I actually watched this early 2000s.
Okay, fair enough.
So I'm much later than you. But what aged this more than anything is the fact that, was it Piccadilly Circus had a porno theatre?
Yeah, that definitely does it. Although for me, it's always the weirdest things. Like the hospital just looks 70s as fuck. And Nurse Alex Price, don't get me wrong, the fact that she's professional stuff makes her somehow more sexy, and it all has the air of Carry On Doctor to it.
Yeah.
You feel like it's just about to tip over the edge. But of all the things, the weird things for me that really age this are the metal tins that they used to cover the food.
Yeah.
My wife reliably informs me that they're referred to as cloches or cloche, which is a French term. But there is something about that metal tin on top of the plate where I'm just like, man, that is 70s.
I just call it a cloche, but okay.
It is a cloche, but yeah. I think it is a French word, so I think it would be pronounced cloche, but I'm just finding out about it, dude. I'm not going to judge you, Jesus Christ.
All right, Mr. Pretentious. Or 20p for a newspaper. Or the fact on the advert, there was a News of the World advert. I mean, we'll get into all of these things, right?
Well, the one that really got me, and it's weird because the fact that she says she can't keep up with inflation is very relatable today and very prescient until she takes David to her huge flat in central London where she lives on her own. She's
like, I had that as well.
I'm just a working girl. Yeah, I'm just a poor nurse in a flat like that in central London. Like, she makes out she lives in a box. I was like, dude, if you wanted to live in that flat in central London now, like, let's be clear, pretty close to Piccadilly Circus, you would legit have to be a millionaire, a multi-millionaire possibly. So yes, that definitely aged it.
We'll talk about the film in a sec. I just want, you've already said it.
We'll get around to it for sure.
We'll get around to the film itself. But you said directed by John Landis, right? And it's really weird because, I mean, picked as if, I can't even think of the word. I never think of the words. But pick the wrong one out of this. National Lampoon's Animal House, The Blues Brothers, An American Werewolf in London, Trading Places, Coming to America, The Blues Brothers 2, Three Amigos. Like, what's Oscar? What the fuck, Beverly? Like, and then I've already said it, but An American Werewolf, it does not feel like a John Landis film. Up until the point, it feels like a John Landis film. It's really weird. Like, at the beginning, it doesn't. You've got them walking through the moors. You've got them chatting, things like that. They're getting attacked by werewolves. You've got the whole werewolf transformation, things like that. All this feels like classic horror shtick. But then when you have the banter between David and what was his name? The friend Jack. Ooh, Jack's the fucking standout in this film, by the way, for what he's in. But when you have David,
because he's not in it as much as I thought. Like,
I thought it was constant companion. Do you know what I think that is? I think you're convoluting that with, because I did the same thing with.
You mean?
Yeah, no, with American Werewolf in Paris.
Oh no, I can hardly remember.
The dead guy hung around all the time.
No. I can assure you, I am not mistaking anything about this film with American Werewolf in Paris. That film,
we'll get to that.
The only thing I really remember about that film is the goddamn bungee jump scene, which is both horrendous and makes zero sense. But yes, we'll get to that in Legacy.
Yeah, but sorry. What I'm trying to say is, it doesn't feel like a John Landis film. It's really, really weird that this is a John Landis film. Up until the point, like you say, when you have the banter between them two or the little comedy bits per in, then it completely feels like it's one of his films. And it's really weird because every time we ever talk, not like we talk about it every week, but anytime anyone ever mentions an American Werewolf in London, you get the transformation scene. You get Jack looking more, he's deteriorated more and more and more.
Yeah.
But you never say this is a horror comedy.
See, it's weird you say that because I do, and I actually think it does feel like a John Landis film because I think it gets that balance between horror comedy right. And I totally appreciate where you're coming from because I think a lot of people, when they think about this film, they don't even necessarily think about the film so much. Like, don't get me wrong, a lot of people like myself love this film. But I think most people just know the transformation scene, and like you said, transformation scene. So I went very Sean Connery then, and they remember like Jack and stuff like that. So the bits that stand out, like historically, are the horror elements. Everyone remembers the tree, but when you go back and watch the transformation scene, it's actually more horrific than you probably remember.
Yes.
It's actually like, you know, there's nothing cool about that scene. It's unpleasant. It's really awkward as well. It's, you know, most scenes now when you see someone turn into a werewolf, there's something quite cool about it, even if they are in pain. In this, it's like the bit when he's laying on the floor. He looks awkward. He really does look mid-transformation, like his body doesn't know what it wants to do. Does it want to be human or does it want to be monster? Well, you have the horrific bit when he looks at the camera, like he breaks the fourth wall almost, and he holds us there for a long time. But then, like, while that's happening, there's quite a comedic score in the background, and he actually has a very comedic line during the scene. It's like, you know, when he's in like the height of his pain, out of the blue, he just suddenly says, "I didn't mean to call you a meatloaf, Jack." So it kind of, you know, combines comedy with the horror, and I think that runs through the whole film. And like you said, like the Landis stuff, it really kind of maybe it's clearest when the werewolf stuff isn't there. Like you said, when they're walking.
Yeah, but that's the thing about this, isn't it? The werewolf stuff is minimalist in this. You don't see it much. I mean, it's a big build up to him doing a transformation, and that happens really quickly. And then you get him realizing he's a killer, and then you get another werewolf scene, and then film ends. But going back to, because we should just get it out of the way now because we've already started it. But the transformation scene, the elongation of everything that happens, like his hands that just start stretching and cracking, his face. I think it's
actually like, because everyone remembers the hand because there's the picture of, you know, the still, if you will, of David looking at his hand.
But for me, it's the body.
It's when he's lying. I think it's the feet.
When he's lying on the floor. And he's like writhing in pain, and you can tell what they've done. They've put his face inside a puppet. He's under the floor. But when that thing's moving like it's just been born randomly, it's absolutely fantastic the way it looks. I love it. I think it's so good. It's such a good practical effect.
Oh yeah, it totally holds up. And like I said, you know, we mentioned in that sequence that even there, and I would argue that for all the death in this film, that is the moment when the film is argued it's most horrific, is when he's transforming. They really fucking go for that there, despite the moments of levity. But, you know, this film throughout, it has that balance between horror and comedy. And not only that, it has that balance between the modern and the old-fashioned. And I think what you're talking about in terms of elements of this film not feeling like a John Landis film in the traditional sense is the fact that it does embrace the old-fashioned as much as it does the modern. Like, this really is like a love letter to the genre. There's so many references like strewn throughout the film. There's a willingness to embrace the tropes while, you know, reacting to it in a more like modern comedic way, I suppose. But like this film directly references other werewolf films. Like usually you don't get that. It's one of those things, you know, you take for granted in this film. You know, you think of all the zombie films we've had, because there's not been nearly as many werewolf films as, say, zombie films. A lot of zombie films exist in a world where zombies don't exist.
Yeah.
And I actually think of this in many ways as being like the progenitor to something like the Edgar Wright movies, and specifically, obviously, Shaun of the Dead, in terms of getting that balance between horror and comedy. But I actually think tonally, this is much closer to Ghostbusters, because, you know, remember we've had this conversation before when we talked about Ghostbusters, and it was the big issue with the sequel and especially the remake, is that they lost track of the fact that it's not a comedic world. It's, you know, it's lighthearted to an extent, but basically Peter Venkman is funny, but everyone else is taking this very seriously. And it's the same with this. Like, you've got David and Jack, who are, I think, naturally funny characters. Like, you could put those two into any situation and it would be funny because they're just well-written and likable characters. But fundamentally, everyone else in this world is taking this super seriously, but it just so happens to be made comedic by the fact that Jack and David are funny characters. So for that reason, I actually think it's much closer to Ghostbusters than it is to Shaun of the Dead, which I think would be the obvious reference point for many people.
It's funny, isn't it, as well? Because they're all in slightly different movies. Like David and Jack are definitely in a comedy. That's the way they live it.
Yeah, but that's the thing, though. I think it works for them because they're
no. But I'm not denying it. I'm just saying they're in a comedy. Then you've got Nurse. What was her name as well? Jenny Agutter. Nurse Alex.
Alex Price.
Yeah, Alex Price. She's in a love story up to a point. It's that classic love story. Same with the doctor. The doctor's trying to do his own investigation about what's going on. And then you've got the guys who also include Rick Mail randomly.
Yeah, I fucking never noticed that before.
No. You've got the guys in the back that in the Slaughtered Lamb who are in your classic horror. They had
really? Yeah.
They got the.
It's very much broken glass, isn't it? Like,
they've got the Pentagon on the wall with the candles. You've got nobody's allowed to leave, but if you leave, we're not going to help. Like all these things. Like nobody should know our business. That is horror trope to the max. That is, and then
it really is kind of classic British horror. And that otherness of kind of like being out in the sticks and some of the characters that you get up there.
Yeah, but what I like is it all works. It always it doesn't feel out of place. You've got the two comedians who go into the Slaughtered Lamb. I'm going to call them comedians because every time they're on screen together, they're a double act. It really is.
Oh no, they really are playing. But like they're very much the John. It's almost like John Landis put himself in a horror film, and he put like again. I think it comes back to that idea that he has his characters. Like he's written John Landis characters, the two of them, and he's put them in a classic horror film, and that's where you get that clash. Like I think 80% of the film is actually classic horror. But it's everything is alleviated, for lack of a better term, by these two characters, as you say, are playing it almost as a comedy.
Let's go back to, I briefly touched on it. I can't believe I skirted over it so quickly. Rick Mail. As a chess player.
I think the reason I never noticed him is because Brian Glover, who is actually tagged as chess player one, which feels a little bit reductive because he has quite a big role in this. And Rick Mail is actually down as chess player two, funny enough. But Brian Glover kind of just swallows up all the oxygen in the room. Like he's such a big performer. He's such a classic thespian. He did the exact same thing. I'm not like when I think of Brian Glover, I always think of Alien 3. And Alien 3 is a film which is bizarrely filled with British thespians, but of all of them, Brian Glover kind of goes above them. You know, he's the one who like gets your attention in every scene, and he does so in this as well. Like, don't get me wrong, I think God, what's his name? The doctor you already mentioned, John Woodvine as Dr. Hirsch. Yeah, he's fantastic. And one of my favorite scenes is actually when the Dr. Woodvine, goes to the Slaughtered Lamb and has that kind of, I don't want to say showdown, but that kind of clash of, southern and northern England, the city versus the countryside and stuff like that. It's just very interesting, though, that he's not actually going to the north of England. He's actually going to Wales, which is a bizarre thing I never knew before. Because East Proctor, which is in the film, is actually Crickedarn, which is southeast of Bulleth Wells, which is in the Black Mountains of Wales. So all those scenes in the pub and stuff in the Slaughtered Lamb, that's all shot in Wales of all places. But the thing is, though, those pubs, they still exist. I might have told
you walk into a North Wales pub or a West Wales pub, and if you're speaking English, they'll all start just speaking Welsh to just alienate you, kind of thing, just because.
And sometimes you just get that whole like otherness thing. Like I went to a pub on the Isle of Skye, which is off the coast of Scotland. And I walked in with, it was four of us, and everyone just did that thing where they just kind of stopped and you could see what was happening. They all looked at me and went, well, he's a giant, but nobody said shit. And it was like everyone else was on, it wasn't threatening, but it was weird. But then just like Brian Glover's character does in the film, one brave soul came up and talked to me. And as soon as he did, the whole pub descended on me, and everybody, literally everyone in the pub took a picture of me because I'm 6'7". And one of the guys with us like, is your friend, like, is your husband famous? Like, no. He's just tall. And this is a weird pub up in northern Scotland. But you do get these places.
The other guy,
it's not exaggerated for the film.
The other guy as well, David Schofield, who played Dart Player. I mean, He's massive. He's been in loads of things. He's been in things like Gladiator, From Hell, Superstition, the fucking Captain Jack thing. What's Captain Jack? Fucking Jack Sparrow films. What are they called?
The Caribbean.
There you go, Pirates of the Caribbean. He was in one of them, but he made me laugh, right? Because he was so pissed off right at the beginning. You made me miss. You need to leave. And then when they leave, oh, maybe they should come back. Maybe we should help them.
Well, it is weird, like their kind of turnabout faces that, you know, at the start you think like they're almost in on it. Instead, all they really are is they know it. Yeah. So it's like they're first like, get out. But as soon as they get out, everyone's like, dude, we can't just let them die. And they do actually go and try and save them. And I do love, so go back to the start of the film, when they get dropped off, Jack and David, and they're out in the middle of the moors. And it reminds you what like backpacking and traveling used to be like. It's like there's no sat nav, there's no like booking.com. They're literally just wandering around looking for a place to stay. And of course, you know, it all brings back to the idea that, you know, mobile phones are, you know, to say that to the detriment of horror films would be a massive understatement, but they've kind of ruined horror films, haven't they? And it's just great that in this film, they go one off, you're like, yeah, this could totally happen. And I love the sequence when they do get attacked by the wolf on the moors. The only thing I wish they had done, because there's like a force majeure moment, I'm not sure if you've seen the film, the whole idea of, you know, having to deal with a decision you make with a rush of blood. And it's like, when Jack gets attacked, David initially just runs off, doesn't even try to help him. And I was like, it would have been cool if they'd gone full force majeure. And he just run off, left him behind, but got, you know, attacked anyway. And then they'd had that kind of back and forth after, like, Jack comes and visits him as a, you know, a member of the undead and says, dude, you absolutely left me. But in fairness to David, he did go back. You know, we all like to think we'd go back to help our friends. But I mean, I gotta be honest, if you and I were out in the moors and you were getting attacked by a werewolf, I mean, I don't think I'm turning back for you, dude. I think I'm just running. And it's nothing against you, but I'm like, what am I going to achieve? This is just to be two dead idiots with a werewolf. I don't want that fucking grief. At least one of us should try and get away. You know,
it's that joke, isn't it? I don't have to run faster than that werewolf. I just need to run faster than you.
Yeah, like you need to run faster than Rob. That's it.
Yeah. Oh, you'll win on that one, mate. Don't worry about it. You know what's funny? Do you know when we saw David and Alex together? Dustin Hoffman and Rachel Gyllenhaal. No, was it Rachel? Maggie Gyllenhaal.
Maggie Gyllenhaal, yeah.
Look, exactly. I could have sworn I was watching Maggie Gyllenhaal and Dustin Hoffman getting it on. Like, they looked completely...
Oh, you thought David looked like...
David looked like... Well, yeah, I mean, Alex Price didn't look like Dustin Hoffman.
No, I'm just saying he's quite a bit taller. No, I see what you mean. She does have a Maggie Gyllenhaal thing, and I think that's one of the reasons she is smoking
though.
She's really, that's the thing though, and I think it's the same with I was just going to nurse Alex Price, but the same thing with what's her name?
Jenny Agutter.
Jenny Agutter, or Agutter, whatever you want to call her. You know, I think most people now think of her as like Call the Midwife, don't they? That's what most people reference.
I couldn't tell you. I've never seen.
Oh well, she's in Call the Midwife. That's certainly what my wife knows her from anyway. But she's not like like she's clearly attractive. But like Maggie Gyllenhaal, she's not like a classic beauty. But there's just something sexy about her. And in this, there's something like I think.
You know where it is, don't you?
The fact that she's a nurse.
Yeah, it's the nurse outfit.
Yeah, but the other one, like, you know, the girl with the, like, she's more of a, you know, she seems to be quote unquote a bit more of a goer, dare I say, and she isn't sexy. There's something about her.
Because she's giving off matron vibes.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, she's giving off matron
like you
vibes,
said. I don't think it is just the nurse's outfit, because you see her afterwards, and obviously you see her outside of work. Her and David kind of have like their little dating thing, and there is just something sexy about it. Like, you know, I don't look and go, oh, she's beautiful in the traditional sense. But like you said, just like Maggie Gyllenhaal, she is totally sexy. And I think it is one of the most important aspects of the film, because everyone remembers David and Jack, obviously. But this film doesn't work if David and Alex doesn't work.
Yeah.
Because you have to believe that they fall in love.
Because they put the love story within the middle of it, and it works. So, because you get
I think it takes it back to your point earlier, which I think was hit the nail on the head, that Alex, or Jenny Agutter, and the character Alex Price, she's not in a horror film. She's in a love story. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right there.
Yeah, it's a tragic romance, basically, what she's in. So we watched this film, right? This film's an hour and 37 minutes. I bet you can't guess, you probably can, what part I think could not be filmed this day and age.
Is this going back to the porno scene?
Of the entire film? What film are they not filming? If they did this, what part are they not filming in 2020?
I have no idea. Go for it.
A very naked man with a boy in a school uniform asking for balloons.
Right. I was going to allow that because I was thinking at the time, but I was like, no, fair enough. He's stuck in the bushes. What can he do? But when the kid handed over the balloons, the kid had such a weird look on his face. I was like, what are they trying to convey in that scene? Because they've obviously gone out their way to keep it in the film. And it's almost like the little kid is like, maybe I am gay. And I was like, that was
because
fucking
he was
weird.
I don't know if he was. I mean, I'm guessing he was naked when he's talking to the kid, because he's naked up to that, even to the point where you do see werewolf dick. Like you see you see his dick, like 2 shots. Not as a werewolf.
That's when he's a human, though. Yeah,
when he's a human, but he's still a werewolf, isn't he? Just
yeah. But you just see little glimpses. I think it's absolutely fine. But I
don't know if it's absolutely fine.
Today, like, you can't.
They're not doing that this day and age. Can we borrow your 7-year-old boy so a naked man can borrow his balloons?
I'm sure he didn't see anything. I mean, I'm in the mindset that, they're filming, it should be fine. But yes, I do take your point that in this day and age, they probably wouldn't film that. Probably. but that is one of the few things. It's a weird film because, as we already mentioned, there's so much in this film which, and it comes back to the conversation we've had a whole bunch of times for a whole different, bunch of films we've covered on this idea that the 80s weren't the 80s until around 83, and that the movies before that, a lot of them actually felt like 70s films. This one's really weird because in so many respects, like certainly in terms of the dialogue and stuff, it feels very modern and definitively 80s, if nothing else. But it also looks like a 70s film, and it's kind of shot, and it even has the pacing of a 70s film.
Yeah.
When I think of an 80s, like horror film, you think of like slasher films like Nightmare on Elm Street. When you think of monster films, you think of like The Lost Boys and stuff like that. This isn't those things.
No.
It's almost like it's so far ahead of its time, especially with the fact that it kind of twists genre tropes and references the genre itself. It's almost like it skips the 80s and goes straight to the 2000s. This belongs more in, if I was talking about this film in terms of what it's trying to do, it belongs with, I already mentioned Shaun of the Dead, but it's like the screams of this world. This is like a 90s or a 2000s film rather than an 80s film. So I say, like, part of it feels like the 70s, and then some of it feels like it could have been made 10, 15 years ago. It never feels particularly 80s.
It is ahead of its time in certain aspects. Massively. I totally agree with you on that. Do you know what I loved? I loved the opening. You got
me too.
You got the slow song Blue Moon, which I'm
going to go on record now and say it's fantastic, but it does conjure up images of Manchester City for me, so I find that very upsetting.
Yeah, I'm not a football fan. I don't know what that means. But you got the slow song Blue Moon, Over the Moors. Just the fog rolling in. Every now and then you get a bit of a credit. It's absolutely...
Did you notice one of the credits actually says, and Lycanthrope Films Limited Productions? Yes. So the references are right from the start. And every song in this film, every single one...
Well, there's only 3 songs, isn't there? I noticed.
Well, I mean, there are different versions of Blue Moon, though, aren't
there? There's one at the beginning, one at the end, and then there's... not Blue Oyster Cult.
There's Bad Moon Rising by
Creedence Clearwater Revival, yeah.
There's Moon Dance by Van Morrison for the sex scene. There's Blue Moon by Sam Cooke. I think there's Blue Moon by Bobby Vinton, and I think that's the one for the opening. And then there's Blue Moon used during the end credits, but that's by the Marcells. So
yeah, and that's what I loved,
because you got the different tones.
You had the slow Blue Moon at the end, and then after David dies, it goes straight into then just an upbeat version of Blue Moon.
Yeah,
and when
which is what a perfect ending.
And when David's about to change, you get Bad Moon Rising by Creedence Clearwater Revival,
which is an absolute banger.
It is an absolute
banger.
Yeah,
it totally adds that, and that is one of the things. Like every time things get pretty dark in this film, like there's always a musical cue to like often take the edge off. The only time that doesn't happen for the really bizarre dream sequences. And I'm actually surprised that more movies, like going back and watching this, it allows for this kind of creativity, which doesn't need to be directly linked to the narrative. It's like, you think about how David Lynch has taken that to the nth degree. He's like, well, I'm going to have dream logic in everything, so basically I can do what I want. In this film, obviously the dreams are linked to the narrative, but it allows him to have these like really imaginative shots in the middle of the film, which don't have to like naturally link to the narrative. It's like when he's running around the woods, and for some odd reason, British woods just look British. When he's running around the woods, you're like, no, they shot on location. I couldn't tell you why, but it just looks British as fuck. And sorry, Karen.
No explanation as well around the fact that there was Nazi werewolves taking out his family. You don't need an explanation. Awesome. Just it looked fantastic. I wonder. Do you remember the film Grindhouse with Tarantino and Robert Rodriguez? And they had the fake trailers in the middle, and now they've released some of those films. Yeah. Rob Zombie did one, didn't he? The Werewolf Women of the SS. I'm wondering if he got the idea from this, because it's pretty. I mean, they were women, but
he must have, right?
Yeah.
But that's another one where it's like the absurdity sits alongside the horror, because you're like, well, this is ridiculous. Why is he dreaming about Nazi? And I guess, it's kind of linked into like the idea of like fears. It's like, well, I like there's nothing scarier right now than the idea of me turning into a werewolf. Oh, except for maybe a Nazi werewolf, combining like two of the most evil things. And he gets his throat slit, and and it's horrendous. But like I said, it comes side by side with comedy without it ever feeling forced. It's like the one that always gets me is when he's having his first confrontation, we'll call it, with Jack after Jack's been killed, and he shows up on his hospital bed.
And he's just toast.
It's like, yeah, and he literally says in the same sentence, he's like, you ever talk to a corpse, David? It's boring. And it's like, you think, oh, this is going to be like a comedic back and forth. And then the next line is, take your life, David. Kill yourself before you kill others.
Yeah.
And it's like, it works. Somehow it works that those two lines fit next to each other in this film, and it's amazing. And I have to mention when we are talking about Jack, and you already alluded to.
Yeah, I want to go on to Jack as well.
For Jack are amazing. I think it's almost unfair how good the effects are on Jack as he becomes more undead and becomes more decrepit, because Rick Baker, who is arguably, I would say, more famous for this film than the actual director, John Landis, simply because, as I mentioned earlier, everybody remembers the transformation scene, and everyone remembers this as like something of a peak for practical effects. But the transformation sequence is so successful that everyone's forgotten how good the effects are on Jack, because they are ungoddamn believable.
His second look is
perfect.
When he's in the dark in Alex Price's house. Why can't I just call her Alex? I don't know. But
yeah, I'm the same. It's because it sounds like a guy's name. My mum's called Alex. I need to get over that.
What I loved about this as well is all the werewolf tropes being thrown on their head. Mm-hmm. So I'll go through a couple. Right, Jack has said the bloodline has to die before all us who are killed by them can leave limbo.
Is that a real trope?
Well, no, no, that's what I'm saying. It's thrown on his head. The real trope is killing. I think it's the progeny, isn't it? Or the progenitor, the one who actually started.
Yeah,
so you have to kill him to end the bloodline. In this one, they're saying anyone that's been created as a werewolf from this one werewolf needs to die. All of them need to die in order for us to be released. I think that's absolutely great.
It's cool, but so just be clear then, because I couldn't decide. Like the whole thing about like if you're killed by a werewolf, that you become undead and you're forced around the world. That was made up for this film. Yeah,
I believe so. Yeah, that's a little bit. I've never seen that trope anywhere else. It's not a trope if it's just one thing. I liked as well. Do I need a silver bullet? Don't be stupid, David. Like you'll just die, and you can tell that at the end as well. Well, I mean, it was at the beginning when they killed the other werewolf, didn't they? I'm pretty sure that first werewolf was gone. So yeah, that's great as well. In regards to the fact that they're just making their own rules for this, they're not following rules. But
that's the thing; they are like following the tropes, and they're following certain tropes. And I think the important thing is they're always celebrating the genre itself and celebrating the history of werewolf films, while simultaneously making something completely new. And it keeps coming back to, I've said it plenty of times, that balance. They get the balance of horror comedy. They get the balance between tradition and something completely new. Everything about this film feels like it walks a fine line, and sometimes I think it's more luck than judgment when you nail something like this. And I think very few films thread the needle, so to speak, in the way that this film did. But I completely agree with you. It's like, like you said, you have all these twists on the genre, but at the same time it feels old-fashioned, and you're just like, how is it both things at once? And it's so many things going on at the same time. It's only 97 minutes long. It never feels rushed, and nothing ever feels forced. It just feels, and like as soon as they show up, David and Jack, that helps as well. The fact that you already know them, they just have their little back and forth on the moors. You're like, yeah, I know these guys. You're comfortable with them. They're likable, and you're just off to the races. And I think every single part of this film individually works to make the whole more than the individual sum of its parts, I think.
Do you know what made me feel so uncomfortable in this entire film?
What's that?
I have an issue, right, with people touching my wrists. I hate it. It's the worst thing in the world. The bottom of the wrist, mind. Like
I know someone else had the same issue.
Yeah, I absolutely hate it. So when he's holding that pocket knife on his wrists, I was squirming in my seat. I was like, no.
And to bring that full circle back to what we're talking about how the horrific or the emotional can live alongside the absurd. You have to remember that was the most emotional scene in the film when he's on the phone, and it's perfectly pitched as well, because usually in this kind of film, he phones home, he speaks to his mum and dad, and he has that emotional, I love you guys, and blah, blah, blah. Instead, he phones up, he gets clearly his little sister. Nobody's home. She's not really listening to him. He's like, oh, for God, just tell him I love them. And it turns into this awkward conversation. Then it goes to like, he's thinking about killing himself. And then 2 minutes later, he's in a porno cinema and he's being introduced to the undead, and that whole sequence in the porno theater is fucking bananas. It's insane.
Everything about it. I mean, obviously he's talking to the undead and you've got a couple of them smiling and saying, oh, you should do it this way. This is how you should kill yourself. But all the while, against the backdrop of two people having sex, and a random guy comes in on the screen, on the porno theater, and goes, I told you if this had happened again, I don't even know you. I don't even know you. Oh, okay, goodbye. And the porno actor leaves.
It's strange. Not only is the porn that they're watching really odd, but you see a surprisingly large amount of it.
Yeah.
My only criticism of the film, and it was the one problem I always had when I was younger, was that I always thought the final act, and if we take the final act to mean him going to the porno theater and then the big showdown in Piccadilly Circus and stuff like that, I always thought it felt a bit rushed. I've slightly changed my mind a bit there. But
I don't think it was rushed at all.
See, that's how I used to feel, but now rewatching it, I'm like, no, it feels just about pitch perfect. The one thing I will say, though, is that he's thinking about killing himself. Then he goes to the porno theater, and it is quite comedic when he's having his chat with Jack, and Jack's face is literally falling off at this point. And he's being introduced to all the people, and they're all over the place. You get the one guy, he's like, oh, I'm dead now, you piece of shit. My wife's, she's a widow, and my kids don't have a father. And then you have the other couple who are surprisingly chirpy. Like, oh, hello, we appear to be dead and all that. And it all seems to be quite entertaining. And it's almost like, not only do you as a viewer, are you encouraged to forget what's going on at that moment narratively, but so does David, because all of a sudden, it's like he's forgot that the full moon's coming. Like he's talking about how he should kill himself. And then all of a sudden he just transforms like, oh yeah, shit, the full moon's like now. I really should have been on top of that. But hey, maybe that's why I always felt like it was a bit of a rush, because it felt quite jarring that he was talking about killing himself, and then all of a sudden he had that transformation, which obviously leads to the end of the movie.
Check out this random link, right? The porno actress, played by an actor or an actual porn star called Lindsay Drew, right? Whose husband or partner was Ben Dover.
Brilliant.
Whose son, those two have a son named Tiger Drew Honey, who is an actual proper actor. He was one of the kids in that Outnumbered with I can't remember his name, Hugh, whatever his name was. He was in Cuckoo with Andy Samberg. Yeah. He's been in films. He's been in loads of shit. And it's just random that you got this mainstream kid whose parents are porn stars, whose mother has one legitimate acting credit. Yeah. And it's as a porn star.
But the thing is, at least she was acting in a very respectable porno theater, because I'm not sure if you noticed outside, but there were different prices for stalls and circles. Yes. I mean, this is a classy establishment.
I mean, you could help yourself to concessions. There was Coke, there was popcorn, there was...
treat yourself. I mean, it is one of those things, when you look back, you're like, dude, how fucking desperate were people that you went to like a porno theater to watch porn with strangers. But then I think back to when I was younger, and I think of like, there was zero access to porn, literally zero, especially when you were a kid, nothing, because you couldn't just walk into a shop, nobody had it. So you'd have that one porno mag, which would do the rounds under school. I remember there was one out in the woods next to my school. It was there for months, and people would still go back and pick it up. Absolute savages.
I think we've had this conversation previously, but I'll bring it up again. My wife, who is 6 years younger than me, didn't know that there was a trend of finding porn in the wilderness.
Oh, 100%.
Like
it was almost like left behind like gold.
Yeah, so you either leave it behind for the next person, or somebody's wife has found it and made you get rid of it. So you've taken it randomly because you don't want to take it to the bin. You've taken it to the local woods.
Yeah, you just show it in the fucking woods.
Just in an alleyway. Yeah, because I found a black bag full of it. Dave, who does a podcast with us every now and then, I think he found a duffel bag down an alleyway full of porn. Like, yeah, it happens.
No, it absolutely did. Like, even as far for me as like university, because nobody had internet in their room or anything like that. And I remember one dude had a porno mag, and it got shared around the entire block of flats. So we lived in a block of flats, like, because we were actually on site in university. So we're in H block, and I'm not gonna lie, I was one of those fucking people, and I'm just like, God damn, that is just so fucking gross. And that was in like 2000.
You know what that makes me think of? Have you ever seen a TV show called Blue Mountain State?
No.
It's about an American football team. If you get a chance to watch it, it is actually quite funny, but it's very adult. And there's an episode where the team start winning because they've all shared a pocket pussy.
Oh, well, that's just adorable, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's just fucking adorable. I mean, that is a step beyond. And like you said, I'm going to go on the record here and say there is no excuse for these kind of shenanigans in modern day. No. We were forced into these actions out of sheer desperation. That's the point. But anyway, moving on. So you get to like the porno theater sequence, which I actually think is fantastic. You know, again, both comedic and horrific in its own way. And then you get the big showdown in Piccadilly Circus. And it is one of those things, like the whole idea, necessity is the mother of invention. You mentioned the fact that you don't actually see much of the wolf. You see everything about the transformation. They obviously put all their effort into that. It's like, we can pull this off. But in terms of having the wolf actually move, I think it was basically a Jaws-like situation. They're like, we can't make it look convincing. So you always get just hints of the wolf, but it encourages like really interesting uses of camera work, of like, you know, first person perspective, like the famous sequence in the London Underground. It's basically all done from like first person perspective. I'm sure they would have loved to have shown more Werewolf at the time, but you only see one little glimpse of him when the camera is up the escalator and it's looking down on him, and you just see him walk into frame. But that's all you get, and I'm sure it's due to the limitations of the technology, but it absolutely works for this.
Yeah, it's the same in the porno theater when the copper goes in and flashes his torch, and you just see the quick glimpse of him look up from the mangled body, snarl, and then he runs away, and then it's a lot of banging on the streets. And the main thing you see of him then is when he's in the alleyway with Alex at the end. Yeah. And I'm calling a bit of bullshit on that alleyway, by the way. The fact that not one copper who were all in a line hit Alex when they shot him.
Well, I assume they kind of had it lined up. I'm surprised she got through, but I forgot how violent the scene prior to that was, because obviously you have David as the werewolf
when he's
running out into Piccadilly Circus. Well, the bit before that, when like the bus like crashed into another, and a guy flies out the top window, another dude gets crushed. It reminded me almost of the end of Life Force, where it really kind of peaks and you just get everyone's getting fucking murdered. I was like, God, this is much more violent than I remember. And yeah, to speak to your point, the head getting ripped off of the cop, and I was like, is this just like a really long setup? Because earlier in the film, I was like, what is the point of this cop duo? It doesn't feel like it goes anywhere. And I think all they were doing was establishing is, this guy's a dick, you don't like him, so then at the end of the film, when he gets his head literally bitten off, you're supposed to cheer.
And that was one of the things that was shit about it, that was forced comedy. You had those two coppers, that was forced comedy, and that didn't feel right.
I absolutely agree. Well, yeah, I'm stepping on hates here, but that was one of my least favorite parts of the film, with the cop duo, which didn't feel like it worked. It didn't feel natural, and I don't think it went anywhere. And again, like we mentioned earlier, everyone else is playing this movie straight, except for, and I think Jack and David are playing it straight, but they're just naturally funny. Whereas they feel like they've walked in from another film. They don't belong in this film at all. And they were they were the only thing that was, you know, when I was looking at hates for this film, and I'm not gonna lie, I really struggled. The only thing that came easily to me was like, I don't like the cops.
The whole slapstick thing about it as well was, it just wasn't. What the fuck as well, changing the subject completely, was Frank Oz doing in this film?
Oh yeah, he did play Miss Piggy as well, didn't he?
Yeah, that's what I mean. But like, he's just Mr. Collins. Like,
it's weird. And there's another one as well. Like, Alan Ford is the taxi driver in this, the guy from Snatch.
Yes,
yeah, he's in it as well. Just you get these random faces.
I recognise the hospital porter as well, Albert Moses, but I'm not too sure where I've recognised him from. I didn't really check out his IMDb, so
I can't remember it all off the top of my head. But yeah, like you said, the weirdest thing with this film is
East is East.
East is East. There it is. Good shout. Good shout. The strange way is like the ending, because a couple of weeks ago we did The Fly, And we talked a lot about how disturbing that final sequence is, where he gets his head blown off and then the film just ends. This film ends in almost the exact same way.
Yeah.
So, take away the fact that obviously they're shooting around Alex and, does that make sense? Literally, it's like she goes to Alex in much the same way. She's in tears in the same way Gina Davis was. Okay, she's not the one pulling the trigger, but he has his moment, like he's going to go for he gets shot, he's dead, credits. The only difference here is you have another great musical cue with is the aforementioned Blue Moon by the Marcells kicking in the moment you're like he's dead on the floor, she's bawling her eyes out, bringing that upbeat musical number, and you're just like, fuck, what a perfect ending to, dare I say, a near perfect film in many respects. It had some issues, I'm not going to get too carried away, but it's a great movie, and it really does nail that final shot.
Yeah, and to be fair, for this entire Hugtober season, I think we've picked some bangers because, again, as you're saying, it's a near perfect movie. There's not a lot. I mean, to be fair,
I'm worried we're just going to have a straight run. Like, we're going to agree on every score, and every score is going to be the same.
Oh, don't worry.
I've got a funny feeling it's going to be all the way through.
We'll get out of Hugtober and we'll be back to normal. I'm sure you'll pick some sort of shitty Karate Kid knockoff. No, I'll do the knockoffs of Karate Kid.
No, you do the knockoffs. I actually picked the genuinely good Karate Kid. But sorry,
like an hour and 37 minutes. There's no fat on this at all. No. It's just it's lean and it's so good. There's a lot going on with it. No, exactly. There's a lot going on, but they seem to marry it quite well. Like I said, there's so many different genres within this film, and none of it feels out of place, except for the bumbling coppers. Yeah. Well, yeah, because there's quite a famous sex scene in this film between David and Alex at her apartment. I'm on board for pretty much all of it. That's the bit with Moondance by Creedence Clearwater Revival, and the sex scene is actually fantastic. It's surprisingly grounded. It actually feels like two people having sex. Excuse me, the only bit I don't buy into is them in the shower. It just looks awkward. And I'm never sure about the whole having sex in the shower. I'm not sure if they're even having sex in the shower. She's just kind of nibbling on his shoulder. I mean, one thing, it doesn't work for guys like us. I mean, I'm 6'4", I'm 6'4", you're 6'7". This is not going to work. Oh, yeah, because everyone forgets, it's like in the movies, they just slip it in and they're off to the fucking races. You've got to lift your other half. And it's like, I'm not saying my wife's not heavy at all, but it's still, it's a human person. I've got to carry, it's just awkward as shit. And they're now wet, so they're slippery. Oh, they're slippery. Oh my God. And you see, right, this is just a warning to anyone who's thinking about it. If you've ever tried to have sex underwater, don't do it. It's fucking horrible. That's it. Just don't do this film. Just a general warning. It's just not cool. There's a lot of splashing and sloshing, and anyway, the more I go into the details, the more upsetting it gets. So I'm going to stop there. Yeah, I think we should move on. So, favorite scene. I want to share stories about underwater sex. Or is that a new podcast? No, I think that would be a new podcast. All right, so the thing is, I could say the shower sequence, I'm joking. I could say the Nazi werewolves, because I do genuinely love that sequence. But the transformation is definitely the best scene. It's the most iconic sequence. Don't get me wrong, I would have loved if he had gone through all that pain, all that horror, but then he'd come out looking like Harold Howard from Teen Wolf at the end. When he opens the door and his dad's there and he looks like a fucking badger. Like, you are the worst werewolf in the world. I just love the idea of Harold having the same kind of horrendous transformation at the end of it. Looks in the mirror like, what the fuck? All that for this? Jesus Christ. Why have I got a normal face and just a halo of hair on my face? You just, I don't know, they run out of budget with Harold there, poor guy. But yes, the transformation sequence. And I was concerned, I was like, I hadn't seen this film in 20 years. And I knew the film itself was likely to still be good. But I was like, would those physical effects still stand the test of time? And they fucking do, man. Jack looks great. But yes, the transformation sequence absolutely slays to this day. And it's not just the fact that the special effects are so good. It's shot brilliantly. And as I said, it's still unique because he's in so much pain. It's so awkward. And that famous, look at the camera, which is a really bold move. But again, it fucking works in this film. So yeah, for me, it's the easy answer. But yeah, the transformation sequence is my favorite sequence in the film. Yeah, I mean, I can't disagree. That is a fantastic sequence. But in order to be a little bit diversive, I guess, I'm going to go with the opening. You got the Moors. It looks fantastic. Mm-hmm. The song playing over it sets the tone as well, doesn't it? Yeah, and then you just see the truck pull up and two random guys get out of a sheep herder thing, and I think it all looks good.
Yeah, no, I love that sequence as well. I could have picked a whole bunch. It's only because that's the most iconic. And I get the idea. It's almost like it'd be lazy if we both picked it. But there's numerous fantastic sequences in this film. But yeah, the transformation sequence remains iconic for a reason. In terms of love, number one, physical effects, already mentioned them a bunch of times. Number two, great dialogue and the general oddness of the movie in favor of genre tropes, which I think makes it stand out to this day, or certainly makes it so far ahead of its time. You know, this does not feel like a 1981 movie. Yeah. And number three, David and Jack are great. But the heart of the movie, I think, is David and Alex. And I think the movie, as important as David and Jack are, I was surprised going back, rewatching this film, how little Jack's actually in it and how important David and Alex's relationship is. Like, if their relationship doesn't work and you don't buy into them falling in love immediately, it does get a little bit campy and ridiculous. But despite the fact she seems to be professional in her job, she falls for David's kind of kooky charms. And a lot of that does come down to, God, what's his name? The actor who played David Norton. He has a natural charisma, which you'd absolutely buy into. So I actually think David and Alex are absolutely essential. So that's my third love.
For me, David and Alex, I think they're great together. Mm-hmm. David and Jack, I think they're great together.
Yeah, they totally are.
Yeah, because Jack is... They're two different. Like you said, you got David and Alex, which is the romance story. You got David and Jack, which is the weird horror comedy side of it. But
they actually feel like friends.
Yeah,
like absolutely. You buy them as friends. Like, they're not exactly the same. They're not like two peas in a pod. They seem to be different kind of guys. Their banter's all a bit throwaway, but you're just like, this feels like we're watching two guys who've been friends for like 20 years.
Yeah. And finally, of everything I could have picked, I'm going to pick the not sticking to usual tropes. Their rules for this film, and I think it's a really good rule. Mm-hmm. So I think that's great. So I'm going to stick with that one for my third.
Yeah, well, it's what makes it unique while also classic, and I think that is important. That is willing to push the boundaries, do something different. In terms of hates, number one, just the state of British TV in the 80s. It just reminded me of my youth. Like, when he, like, just before he transforms, and it's another great sequence, before he actually transforms the first time, they actually kind of throw you off the scent by making the sequence that precedes it really mundane.
Yeah. He's
like trying TV, he's reading a book, you've got like the chilled out music, and then obviously you get the scene. But as he's going through like the 3 channels and they're all gash, and I fucking hate darts. I'm like, God damn it, man, that's what it was like. And it's almost like he films that sequence to tell American viewers, have you seen what it's like in the UK? Because obviously even in the 80s, they still would have had cable, they would have had a whole bunch of channels. We had like, channel 1, 2, and 3, and it was just depressing as shit. Number 2, I was gonna say the final act feels a tad abrupt. But he used to, but now, like I said, when I go back to it, I feel quite differently about it. So
it doesn't feel abrupt at all. I think it moves at a good pace that ends the film really well. So
no. So I'm going to actually drop that. So I'm going to go number 2. The fact that supposedly poor Alex can live in a large central flat in London on her own is very depressing. Going back and watching this, and the other one, the obvious choice for me, is the cop double act, which I'm not even sure if I hate it in and of itself. I just hate the fact that it's in this film because it just doesn't belong at all. So they despite the fact that I put a third on the list, or fourth, I guess technically, they are the one thing that I truly hate about this film.
Yeah. For me, the first one is, I've already said the rules of my loves, but there was one rule I didn't like. The fact that the werewolf is not allowed on the roads.
Yeah.
Like, stick to the roads, you'll be fine. But if you go on the moors,
if you're on the path, he won't bother you. Like, what, like, there's no one else on this path in the fucking moors. Surely a bit of concrete's not going to put him off.
Like, I'm pretty sure it's. Well, I'm not pretty sure. I know it's a full moon. The werewolf can go wherever he wants, but apparently he can't step foot on, like you say, a concrete path. So
you imagine looking over like, oh, I'd love to eat those motherfuckers if only they weren't walking on a designated path in the moors. Son of a bitch. I guess it's just not my night. It's just not. I'm just going to have to wait, sadly. Hopefully these idiots will walk. Oh, they've walked off the path. And let's be clear, when they walk off the path, I know they're having a chat. There's still no excuse for it. No one's just wandering off in the dark onto the path.
Sorry, you know exactly when you've left road.
You feel underfoot. It's wet. You're in England. No fucking way. It's bullshit.
The cop double act is the second one for me. Again, pointless. Mm-hmm. It's just a build up to have him have his head ripped off, and you think, oh yeah, okay, but it's just shit. It's stupid.
No, it just doesn't work now.
And I guess the final one for me is, her flat as well. Like, her flat is absolutely insane.
Yeah, she really does play it up like, oh, you're going to come back to my measly little flat. And with our 2023, even if you take the fact that it's in central London out of the equation, you're like, that's a nice flat. It's got high ceilings. It's really nice. And then, of course, you can't accept. You're like, dude, this is in the middle of London.
Yeah.
How much money does she have? Jesus Christ.
Oh,
so yes,
and,
it is
and sneak a fourth in how uncomfortably close he got to his wrist with a knife. I didn't like that.
Of course.
I didn't like that at all.
That upset you.
Yeah.
Any alternative titles for this film?
No. I mean,
just American Werewolf in
American Werewolf in
London
London or American Werewolf or something. Yeah, it's pointless.
No, fair enough. Any facts for this one?
Yeah, we got a couple of facts. Due to the controversial lack of recognition for Elephant Man, makeup and industry technological contributions became recognized by the Academy Awards in 1981.
Damn straight.
Makeup artist Rick Baker was the first to receive an Oscar in a new category. William Tuttle was the first makeup effects artist to receive an honorary Oscar for his work on Seven Faces of Dr. Lao in 1964. At 31, Baker was also the youngest person to win the award, a record that was later tied by Tammy Lane for The Chronicles of Narnia, The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe.
Not as iconic as this, dare I say.
Yeah. Rick Baker claimed to have been disappointed by the amount of time spent shooting the face-changing shot for the transformation after having spent months working on the mechanism. John Landis only required one take lasting about 7 seconds. Baker felt he had wasted his time until seeing the film with an audience that applauded during that 1 7-second shot.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Like, the camera never holds longer than it needs to. Like, it just always, he makes all the right choices in terms of this is how long you need to see this before it gets weird. I'll move the camera so you don't see any of the edges or the limitations of our technology. Everything's spot on.
David Norton was reportedly cast because John Landis had seen him in a television commercial for Dr. Pepper. However, Norton was later let go by Dr. Pepper because of his nude scenes in this film.
Wasn't he a musician as well?
I'm not too sure.
I'm pretty sure he was, yeah. Anyway, carry on.
At 54 minutes, the cat on a window ledge was prompted to hiss at David by holding up another cat towards his face.
Do you know that cat? I was immediately like, is that Jonesy from Aliens?
Yeah.
I was like, it looks like the exact same cat. And of course, I just think of a ginger cat that hisses. I immediately go to Jonesy. So, yeah, same kind of vibe.
And like most motion pictures, this was filmed in sequence.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I think that always shows if they can manage to. I know it's tricky and stuff practically, but fair play to them for pulling it off.
Rick Baker plays one of the Nazi werewolves in the nightmare sequence, specifically the one who slashes David's throat.
And it is absurd. But when he gets his throat cut, like they don't shy away from it. You see it, and it is unpleasant.
Yeah. The reason why John Landis chose London as the setting was because London was horror central, of course, home of Jack the Ripper, Jekyll and Hyde. So I wanted all that Victorian Gothic, but I also wanted to show the real London of 1981.
Yeah, totally pulled it off.
Right, I'll do one more.
It just feels. It's amazing how both American and British it feels. It's crazy. Just by having a couple of American characters, you're very much seeing the movie through the eyes of an American, obviously. But as someone from Britain, you're like, oh man, this is like bang on. Like, it doesn't feel like an American making a British film. Like, when you watch it, like, no, everything about this feels British as fuck. He's either like a Britain-phile, or whatever you call it, or he's very well informed because nothing feels out of place in this film.
Right, one more from me. David Norton recalled the zoo scene. As for running naked around London Zoo in the scene where I'm in the wolf cage, the only reassurance I had was that the wolves had just been fed. But the handler still said there was to be no loud noises or fast moves.
That's
okay, I said.
I totally forgot about that. He was like, he's next to the wolf.
Yeah. So he said, okay, I said, hopefully this will just be one take. So start rolling those cameras. We were supposed to be done by 9 a.m., but we overran. At one point I looked up and said, wow, why have you got all those extras over there? They replied, they're not extras. The zoo's open.
Fantastic. I wonder if you can get away with that anymore, because obviously the CGI. I'm immediately thinking of like Nope, for instance. Nope has like the ape scene, and it's all done with CGI. Whereas obviously, I'm bringing it back to The Fly again, but they had the baboon in The Fly, and it was a real baboon, a dangerous baboon, just on set giving fucking Jeff Goldblum hugs. And in this, he's just in the cage with wolves. I'm sure they do everything in their power to make it as safe as possible, but
no,
they sort of fucking risk, especially with your willy hanging around. You can't be doing that.
This is the 80s. They just chucked him in a wolf cage and said, let's see what happens.
And just said, fucking hope you don't die, buddy. But it'll be great. It'll be worth it. Don't worry about it. In terms of legacy, I only mentioned the fact that it led the way to the likes of Edgar Wright, but perfectly balanced in horror and comedy. The modern dialogue and classic genre, celebration and combination, which I think is much more prevalent nowadays, but certainly wasn't a thing in 1981.
And the much better film sequel.
Yeah. Oh, Jesus Christ. Well, yes, there is the truly terrible Werewolf in Paris from 1997 with the famous bungee jump off the Eiffel Tower, which if you know anything about the Eiffel Tower, you know that doesn't make sense. It flares out. If you bungee jumped off the Eiffel Tower, you're just going to, I don't know, hit the fucking Eiffel Tower. It's so dumb. Anyway, that film's terrible. I think some people make an argument for this being the best Landis movie. I'm not saying it definitively is because he's got a lot of great films, but I think it's in the conversation. I'm not a Blues Brothers guy. I like Blues Brothers, but I prefer this. I take this over Animal House any day of the week.
Yeah, but I mean, you got Trading Places.
It's coming to America. All of a sudden, I'm just like, well, his legacy is he's just got a lot of really good fucking movies in the 80s.
Beverly Hills Cop 3, we'll leave it there.
Oh, Jesus Christ, that is a bad film.
Yeah.
That might actually be even worse than American Werewolf in Paris. That's how bad Beverly Hills Cop 3 is. It's legitimately that bad.
Yeah,
it's an abomination.
Yeah.
Although I think you could make an argument for this being the best werewolf film. There's not actually been that many werewolf films, and I can't think of too many that are that, like, you had like The Howling and shit like that. That's not as good as this film.
I could rattle off some werewolf films for you, but I wouldn't say that. I mean, there was Skinwalkers. There was there was Wolves with Jason Momoa.
Oh no! Well, there was the aforementioned Teen Wolf, which I do love, but it's not as good as this.
There was what was that? Not the how you said The Howling. Was it just called Wolf with Jack Nicholson?
Yeah, but that wasn't great.
No, I'm not saying they were good. I'm just, I told you.
No, it's a good point, but that's the thing. And there's, I'm not sure if you class them as werewolf films, but the underworld films have werewolves in them.
Well, yeah, there's still
unless you go back to like the classic Universal films, there's not actually all that many. And I'm not sure if there's an obvious, this is definitely better than, American Werewolf in London. Needless to say, I can't think of one off the top of my head, so it has to be in the conversation.
Would you call Monster Squad a werewolf film?
No, it has a werewolf in it, but I wouldn't call it a werewolf film. Mm-hmm. And I also wouldn't say, as much as I do genuinely love Monster Squad, I don't think it's as good as this film.
Oh.
It's not as well made. It's fun. It's like, no, because we did a thing recently, didn't we? A post on, you check us out on Facebook or whatever, where we recently covered the People Under the Stairs. And I said, which would you prefer, The People Under the Stairs or Monster Squad? Now, I made the same argument there that I actually think The People Under the Stairs might be a better film, but if you ask me which one I want to watch, it's Monster Squad any day of the week.
Yeah.
But I think it might be the same here. Like, I think this is a better movie, but if you ask me which one do I prefer to watch on a Tuesday night, it'd probably be Monster Squad.
What about the Gary Busey, Corey Haim one, Silver Bullet?
Yes, this is better than that, I can assure you. God damn, I had not thought about that film in a long, long time. Maybe since the moment it finished in, 1992, whenever I watched it. There was talk of a remake in 2010, but that had some pretty dodgy names attached to it, so probably the best that it disappeared. So personally, I'd be happy for this to remain in the past. I think it's a perfect slice of 1981 cinema. Because it landed in 1981, it doesn't quite feel 70s, it doesn't quite feel 80s, it feels ahead of its time. It makes it feel oddly timeless. And the fact that it does embrace tropes, but also has modern dialogue, it's a really hard film to pin down in terms of a time frame. So I'm happy for it to just exist in its own little weird 1981 bubble.
Yeah, totally agree.
Make a change. So this is the bit where we're like, if you could make one change for this movie and only one, what would you do? It's an easy one. It's the cops. They've got to go. Everything. I found it really hard to find anything else that I'd change about this film. But the cops, who clearly do not belong in this film, have got to go.
I mean, it is the cops, but
it is the cops.
For joke purposes, I'd say I'd have Rick Mayall speak.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. Actually, it would be nice just. I wonder if he'd spoken, would I have immediately pegged him as Rick Mayall? Because even when I rewatched it this time, I didn't notice him as Rick Mayall. It was only when I was looking through the cast, I was like, wait, Rick Mayall was in this film.
Yeah.
Even then, I couldn't picture him in my head.
Well, that's it.
I had to check it out.
I went the other way round. See, I noticed it was Rick Mayall, and I said that looks like Rick Mayall, and then I checked the cast.
Oh, see, I didn't notice it at all. It was literally, I was going through IMDb just to pick up the names. And I was like, wait, Rick Mayall. I was like, he's not in this fucking, where the hell is he? And then you see him, and you're like, yeah, he's there, right? In terms of video games, unsurprisingly, there isn't an American Werewolf in London video game. There are actually very few werewolf video games. It seems a little bit on the nose to pick one, but I would go for The Wolf Among Us by Telltale, not because of the fantasy elements, but because if I was going to make an American Werewolf in London game, it would have to be predominantly dialogue and choice-driven. I wouldn't want it to be an action game. So I'd have it like, you're trying to live your life as a werewolf and manage your life and relationship with Alex at the same time. So it's basically based on the idea that David survived the shooting at the end and is trying to live a normal life where obviously he's trying to rid himself of werewolfism or whatever you want to call it, but he is still a werewolf and he's trying to manage living in London, his relationship with Alex and getting on with his life. So yeah, I would have like the dialogue options of Wolf Among Us and Telltale Games with just a little bit of action thrown in.
Do you know what? That was top of my list as well. I was going to put Wolf Among Us by Telltale Games, but now you've done that, I got to quickly subvert to another one. So I'll go by Supermassive Games, The Quarry.
Oh, yeah, that's a great shout. That's a better shout.
Because again, you've already said it. You've got it's not an action game. You've got all the narrative because
but you pick the choices.
You pick the choices. You have the quick time event. You have things like that. So yeah, I'd have Supermassive Games do a version like they've done for The Quarry, where maybe you're not David, but maybe you're making the choices alongside David running through London. So yeah,
because it's like basically an interactive horror film where you make the choices and they carry on from there. I like the idea that maybe it's from like Jack's perspective. He's dealing with the undead and stuff, and like has to try and convince David. Like you could basically retell the story, but from Jack's perspective. Yeah, that'd be kind of cool. Yeah. But with your choice again, son of a bitch. In terms of scores and recommendations, you will not be surprised. Well, I guess maybe you would be surprised here because the way I've talked about it has hinted that I might go the way of a 5-star review here. I'm going to go 4 by modern day standards because I still think there are certain elements from a visual perspective more than anything else where if you're going back and watching this, you might be like, we talk about the hurdles of going back and rewatching these films. It does look occasionally old. There's no two ways about it. Despite the fact that the effects and stuff hold up, it's just, wow, this really does look like London in 1981. So for that reason, because we're not just reviewing it as a film, we're reviewing it on the basis of rewatching it now, I'm giving it a 4-star, but a very, very strong 4-star and a very, very strong recommendation because it's available now on Amazon Prime. If you have that, you don't have to, if you subscribe to Amazon Prime, it's available on there for free. It's absolutely worth going back to. If you've never seen it, watch it. If you haven't seen it for a while, go back to it because it's as good as you remember. So yeah, a 4 and a recommendation for me.
I think we need to rename Hugtober to Rob and Liam give everything in this season a 4 because
I know.
It's a 4-star and it's a recommendation, pretty much. I mean, it'd be close to a 4.5, but
yeah, me too.
Yeah, I'll stick with 4. And
I'm going to go on the basis and say that in 1981, this was arguably a 5-star film. But going back and rewatching now, I'm comfortable with 4 and recommend.
I'm happy with 4. I think 4 is a great score, especially coming from me. So I'd give it 4, and I would recommend it. It is a great film to watch. It doesn't feel slow. It's paced perfectly well. Yeah, it's got the right amount of horror, comedy, romance, everything you need. So yeah, definitely, it's a very good film, and I would highly recommend it with a 4-star rating.
Yep. So what 4-star film are you going to choose for the last part of our Hugtober season of Halloween podcast? This is the last one. We've done 5 this year, so we've gone full on horror. And this is the last choice is yours. I assume it'll be another 4-star film, but what are you going to go for, dude?
Well, I'm going to have to think about this, aren't I? Because do I want us to do a 4-star or should I just pull out an absolute turd?
No. No. Pick a decent one. Run a good roll here.
Well, okay then. I'm going to have to... Back to my roots, back to my old school days. Loved it in the 80s. It is an 80s film. What would you do if there was a vampire living next door to you?
Move, probably.
Probably. You wouldn't... Or would you try and fight him with an actor from a TV show?
Okay, I know exactly what film.
We're going to go Fright Night.
Yeah, and my God, I mean, another film I've not watched for a long time, but another film where if I had to guess what rating I was going to give that film, I'm like, man, that film screams 4 stars. It absolutely screams 4 stars. Yeah, I know. I'm not going to put that down as a fact now. As I said, I've not seen it for a while, and I am looking forward to rewatching it because I feel like it's one of those films that the poster is maybe, like we mentioned with this film, the transformation sequence has become more famous than the film itself. Yeah, I feel like Fright Night, the poster is more famous than the film because that poster is so iconic. And when I think of 80s horror films, I always think of that classic Fright Night poster, which I absolutely love. But yeah, not seen this film for a long time, so absolutely looking forward to that. But so join us next week for the last part of our Hugtober season of podcasts as we look back at 1985's Fright Night, I believe it is. And thank you for joining us for 90.
Do you want to ask me if I've got anything left to say before?
I was going to say that now.
Sorry.
No. You fucked up the ending. But
it sounded like you were ending the podcast.
I did have that vibe about it, but no, I was going to. You better have something to add now.
No, I got nothing. No, I'm joking.
Oh, you son of a bitch.
We had a message on Facebook from Craig Fox, and he just said, "I just watched The People Under the Stairs because I listened to your podcast this week. I've definitely had fun memories with People Under the Stairs. When I was younger, I saw this for the first time. It petrified me. And now, although I still do like it, it's more of a splatter action than a true horror film. I think he goes for, what did we say? Monster Squad. He chooses Monster Squad over Fright Night as well. So I just like that one. Because
Monster Squad over People Under the Stairs, you mean?
Because he did it in reverse for us. Yeah, Monster Squad over People Under the Stairs. He listened to the podcast and then rewatched the film. So
yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah. I would suggest the other way around, but as long as you listen to the podcast, that's all I give a fuck about. So fair enough.
Now you can end the podcast.
Cheers. Well, in that case, I've been Liam. This has been Rob. You've been listening to the Hey Guys podcast, and we'll see you guys next week. Cheers, guys. Bye-bye.
Cheers, guys.
Oh, and before I forget, where can folk reach us if they were so inclined to?
Well, you can actually reach us on Hey You Guys 80s at Facebook, Instagram, and on Twitter. But if you want to send us a mail, do heyyouguys80s@gmail.com. Send us in your recommendations. Send us in your thoughts about any of the episodes. Just literally talk to us. We'll have a one-sided talk with you on the podcast.
Yeah. We're nice folk. Get in touch. But no, cheers, guys. Bye-bye.
Cheers, guys. Bye now.
Hey, you guys!